how is AI going to impact the user experience field? In so many different ways. And we're already seeing this start to roll out. So I guess just to pick one kind of off the top of my head, I would say it's really going to change the way that we work. It's already starting to change that. It's going to be impactful on the types of work we do, certainly, but even kind of like, I think in ways that we can't even predict right now. It's just, there's too many, it's going to touch too many areas of our work and change so many things that it's really tough to predict accurately. So just as a disclaimer there, I'm spitballing. Anybody else who says they're an expert in this space is also
and know exactly where this is going is probably
making an educated guess.
Exactly.
So all of that said, I'm optimistic in many ways about how this is going to impact us, especially as researchers, in the near term. Like I'm very happy to see all of these new AI-enabled tools and features that are really speeding up, especially research planning and analysis, which were typically like the most tedious parts of
the most
research.
time-consuming.
Yes, and not always the most insightful or exciting for us either. We're starting to see some better tools coming out now, some things that are more thoughtful, also a little bit less like sexy or like you know, like people actually using the technology in ways that it should be used, in my opinion. We can unpack that a little bit more. So like that's the positive side, is like I see it already helping us do our jobs. The negative side, there's always been a lot of snake oil salespeople in UX and related related roles. And I think it's because this work is so complicated and messy and sort of esoteric, especially to business leaders. So we've always had this problem of people come along and they say, hey, we have this framework, and if you pay us, we're the only people who can give you this framework.
It'll give you the framework. Yeah, exactly.
Then you'll have great design. AI seems to be pouring fuel on that fire. And I've seen a lot of really dubious marketing claims being made, unfortunately, especially research tools. Like if you're asking AI, you know, what research methodology you should use next, and you don't have a research background, then like it's probably a good idea just to double check before you get started. Also, I think it's a good way to think about how to work with AI, because you need to give very specific instructions and bite-sized projects. So we don't want to go to ChatGPT and just say like, write my research plan for me. Right? We want to break it down into steps and say, okay, here's my goals. Based on these goals, help me think about what methodology I should use and how many participants I need. Okay, now help me write a screener, and here's my template for working with a screener. So we want to give some constraints. That's kind of a key to working with LLMs, is to give guardrails and constraints. We also want to double check the work, the output, and not just, please don't just copy and paste whatever ChatGPT gives you into like your email to your CEO.
Right.
First of all, people can tell. They can tell when it's clearly like been written by ChatGPT and not edited by you. But I do think like, that's kind of my simple metaphor in a nutshell. But I do think there's a lot more to it than that. And that's kind of my like general advice that I'd give to people who are new to working with AI, especially if they're working with like general purpose tools like ChatGPT. It is different if you're working with a tool like Marvin. If you're working with AI that's much more contextual within a product, it's going to require less of that hand-holding, less of that prompting in many cases. Hopefully a little less double checking, but we still do need to double check.
Yeah, absolutely. Check the references for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great specific example of where I'm seeing. I've been meeting with lots of founders for various AI-powered tools that are targeted at UX researchers, and then I've been listening to their marketing spiel and then kicking the tires on what they actually have. And especially last year, I just was very disappointed. Like the vast majority of the tools that I was being shown. But now I think we are starting to see smarter integration and sort of layers of prompting that are happening behind the scenes, and AI that is within a research repository and already has all of, like, one of the things I said about the intern was, imagine, this is an intern and they don't know anything about you. And so you have to tell them a lot about the product that you're working on and the dynamic of your team and your constraints and all those things. That may not be the case depending on the tool you're working with. If you're working with, a tool that has AI powered features that's already trained on your research repository, you may not need to provide as much of that context. So it's really hard to give advice to people on AI, even within like this specific field, because
Narrow vertical.
there's so many different ways to apply it and so many different types of
Absolutely.
tools.
As you mentioned at the start of your journey, how hard it was to get that first job in UX. Later, you said AI is your research intern. Will that make the first UX role even more difficult to get? Anything you can do to protect the next generation of UXers arriving in the field.
Yes,
I picked this up because we had exactly the same
we
conversation
did.
yesterday, and I thought that was yeah, very very spot on. I do worry about that. What are your thoughts, Kate?
Yeah. As we talked about yesterday, I definitely AJ. We definitely did talk about that. And yeah, I'm a little alarmed. I have to say, like, again, NNG, one of our like roles that we try to play is helping new people get into the field. And the last couple of years have been really difficult for multiple reasons. But even before we reached this period with like economic issues and AI causing problems for us, it was already hard. It was already really
Mhm.
difficult to get that
Yeah,
first UX
yeah,
role. And that's exactly what Prayag and I were talking about yesterday is, well, if you have a robot intern that can do some of the tasks that you used to ask your actual human
actual
assistants
intents to
to
do.
do.
Yeah.
I hope that companies will still see the value in hiring interns, um, because it's a longer term investment. Like, you can train AI, but the AI has its like certain limitations, and some of that may change as we move from LLMs to whatever's happening next. But I certainly still want interns. I still want to train people that maybe in the long run will work for my company, and I can help them grow to do the kind of advanced creative contextual thinking that these tools still struggle with and are limited by. But yeah, I mean, I think it is a real concern. Did you want to share? Because
Mhm.
I know you also have feelings about this.
I do, and I worry about, is it the end of the specialized researcher, right? Like, I know it's very alarming and I know it's not a short-term thing, but like in 20 years, would there be specialized researchers, or would the expectation would be AI plus someone's part-time job, right? A product manager's part-time job. And that, I don't know if that's the world that I am ready for or excited about, because I do think,
Mhm.
like, us researchers, like, we do add a lot of value. At least I would like to believe that we add a lot of value to our employers. So, um,
Yeah. Also, I think, on that note, like adding value to employers, that's been part of the challenge, has been
mhm.
convincing leadership that research is important and valuable and we should be doing it. And that is where I'm a little bit more on the pessimist side, that I think
Uh,
AI is like muddying those waters when they were
mhm.
already pretty difficult to deal with to begin with. I do think though, like if we're looking at what people actually can do and what advantages they have over LLMs, especially, but maybe more generally AI technology, our ability to think about context and nuance in really complicated ways, to me, is essential for being successful in UX research or design or product or like any other adjacent roles. And I have not seen AI tools capable of that. of kind of pulling all these disparate pieces together and synthesizing them into something that's meaningful, and then weighing pros and cons for the business and your users and your dev team, and then making decisions in a way that's going to lead to the best outcomes for all of those things. I haven't really seen AI tools capable of that. And so I think it's one of our advantages, but I do think our roles are going to change a lot. I do think I mean, the ideal thing, Prayag, I think would be like, we talk about having like T-shaped skills where you're really deep in some things and you're shallow on others. Maybe it's more like, I don't know, like an M or something where like AI kind of allows you to go a little deeper on the things that aren't really your areas, but then you still have the value of what you're good at and better at than AI is.
How do you apply AI in research planning? You talked about that a lot, just like in 1 minute, how do you use AI in research planning?
I think the key is, again, to think about it like an assistant. And so use those bite-sized pieces. Don't just expect it to spit out a great research plan immediately. Oh, if anybody is a pro on ChatGPT, they just came out with Canvas, which is like you can kind of collaborate in a document. Still has a ways to go.
Work in progress.
It's a work in progress. But anyway, more of those kinds of dynamics are going to start coming out from these general purpose AI tools. And I'm seeing more tools. I don't know if Marvin has any of these or is planning it on the roadmap, but I'm seeing more tools where like it's already built into the context of it being UX research. And so like it's a tool specifically for that purpose. You don't have to do all the work prompting. Sharing examples, giving it templates to start with, asking it to apply best practices are all techniques that help. Always double checking the work. I kind of mentioned earlier, like using it as like a partner to be like, hey, am I forgetting anything? Is there anything else I should add here? Like those are techniques that I use all the time, anytime.